As we saw, as you looked into the crosstabs, while people who know Shamari figures like Shamari figures, about 40% of the electorate doesn't know it and couldn't rate it. And so, yeah, I think to your point, you have almost 100% name ID for Donald Trump in the United States. You have pretty close to that for Kamala Harris by virtue of her being the vice president for the last 4 years. And so that's kind of what you see in these numbers.
Alrighty, welcome in, kiddos. It's another fantastic week of your favorite political podcast. It is Alabama Politics This Week with Josh Moon and
David Person.
All right, before we get rolling, let me tell you, this is Alabama Politics This Week brought to you by our good friends at Wind Creek Entertainment. I have my visit set up a couple of weeks now. I'm going to be heading down and hanging out for a while with the good people at Wind Creek, and we're going to stay at the resort in Atmore and go. We're going to do all the stuff, and so we're happy about it. I've been a few times already. They are fantastic places. Our friends there, they do a great job, and they are the best sponsors that you could ever ask for because they ask of nothing. Really, they say, we like your show, keep doing it, and here's some money for
it. And I have my own Wind Creek story now.
Oh, nice.
Now, here's my story. It's still not quite as good as I want it to be, but all right. So the lady friend and I, we went down to Destin.
Uh-huh.
And in the course of going to Destin, we got twisted around and ended up in Atmore.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove right by the one in Atmore.
Right.
It was late at night, so we didn't go in or anything because we were trying to get to our hotel. Mm-hmm. But I was really impressed with how big and sprawling that place is. Just driving by it. It looked like it was like there were a whole bunch of folks down there for the Labor Day weekend, man.
Oh yeah, so, it's a hopping place, man. They do a good business. They got a really good product. They treat people right, and it really is a nice upscale place to go. It's a nice hotel and resort. They have a first class spa, really great restaurants. It's great. It really is. And so I hope folks will take us up on it. Look them up online at Wind Creek Entertainment. Book you a stay at a place in Wetumpka, Atmore, Montgomery. Or in one of their, tropical destinations. They've got their own private island in Aruba. I don't know if you know that, but it's a nice place. It's got a great hotel and casino up in Pennsylvania, and I believe they are on the verge of opening one later this year in Chicago.
What? Chicago?
Yeah, sweet home.
Hometown. Okay.
Yeah.
So the one in Atmore is kind of, to me, sort of off the beaten path. I want to go to the one that you can see off the highway, and that's in Wetumpka, right?
Well, no, the one in Atmore is you can see from the interstate. Yeah, you roll right past it on 65. The one in Wetumpka is, I would say, probably a little more off the beaten path, although it's right on 231 if people travel that way.
Maybe that's where we were. Maybe it was Wetumpka.
Oh,
I know wherever we were on some little 2-lane highway, and then all of a sudden, bam, there it was.
Yeah, that makes more sense that you were in Wetumpka, not Atmore. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the one in Atmore is right off the interstate. You can see it gleaming over there from the interstate. So yeah, that's probably where you were. We're in Wetumpka. But yeah, check them out. Wind Creek Entertainment. Look them up online. You can book you a stay and you won't regret it. Speaking of gleaming. I wrote a column this week, and this is going to be our college and college football segment, I guess. Not really sports-ish, but more political, I guess, than anything. Because I wrote about kind of the turnaround of Alabama State University under Quentin Ross, who I've known Quentin and as I put on Facebook for a redacted number of years because I didn't want to date either one of us, but it's been a long time. I met him when he was in the state senate, and I've known him. I mean, he has always been this super professional, very nice guy who got along with everybody, who everybody respected, who, he was just that guy, the guy that you knew would have an answer to whatever was going on. If he was voting for it, he knew about it. He understood the issues. He did, his homework on things, and he knew what was happening. So, I felt when, ASU was going through this trouble, and I covered, just for a little background, I covered ASU for a bunch of years. That's where I started my job in newspapers, was covering ASU's athletic program. And I was dropped right into the middle of the weirdest coach firing in the history of coach firings, in which they fabricated NCAA violations against themselves to be able to fire the coach. But,
wow.
Yeah, it was nuts,
wow.
man. And so this, and I followed them along for forever. And I mean, there was a period of time where I probably wrote 50 stories about in a 3-week or so period about ASU.
Wait, did you say 50?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was every single day, multiple stories sometimes. I mean, there was, let me tell you this. All right. There was at one point in time, I swear to God, this is true. There was a board of trustee meeting held at ASU that was covered live by the TV stations locally and carried into the Birmingham and Huntsville markets, because the governor was there to try to attempt to takeover of the university and open up an investigation into alleged misdeeds that was taking place.
Who was the governor at that point?
Robert Bentley. Yeah, It was a sham. It was built on just fabricated nonsense for the most part.
I remember some of that. I don't remember the board of trustees meeting being broadcast live, but I do remember that whole thing with Bentley and the board down there.
I'll never forget the one of Bentley's legal people going around the table and handing out the results of this audit thing to all these trustees, and one of the trustees throwing it. Just telling them to get the hell out of that meeting. Oh man,
that's funny.
It was, man. Let me tell you this. This was my first real interaction with UW Clement, the famed federal judge.
Oh yeah, very highly respected.
When we first met, he and I clashed a little bit because he was representing ASU as an attorney, and he and I clashed a little bit. And but later on, I said. I called him and I said, you're supposed to be turning over these documents. Are you going to turn over these documents? And he said, we will not be turning over documents. And I said, but the governor's office said you must turn over these documents. And he said, listen to me, Mr. Moon. We will not be turning over documents, and there's nothing the governor's office is going to do to us to make us turn over these documents. Trust me when I tell you this. If he would like to try to make me turn over these documents, I suggest he go to court and do so. And that was a wrap on that, buddy. That was what was going on just prior to Quentin Ross taking over. I mean, it was a mess, man. And I felt like Quentin could come in, could come in and kind of rectify a lot of that because of his relationships in politics, and his love of the university. His parents went there. He loved ASU, and he wanted that job. And I always thought he was crazy, and I told him he was crazy for attempting this. And but he got it, and man, it has been one of the most remarkable turnarounds that you could ever envision for a university. And it's so great because that university, people just don't realize what a university like that means in a community like Montgomery, and to especially the Black community in Montgomery, and what it has meant for generations of families there that never would have had opportunities otherwise. I mean, there's a reason why we have historically Black colleges, right. And so it has meant so much to so many people, and it's so good to see it return to some of the glory, and to have people talking about it in a favorable light. It's so good.
Well, as a very, very proud HBCU graduate and alum, I graduated from Oakwood University. It was Oakwood College back in the day, back in the Stone Age, 1985. And then also I did 2 semesters of grad school up on the hill at the great Alabama A&M University, and I'm on the foundation board currently at Drake State Community and Technical College. I am a big fan, obviously, of HBCUs, and I think they are one of the nation's most valuable resources because of what they do. As you just said, Josh, they have the ability to transform generations of people, communities, and they have produced some of the most important Americans in the history of our country. Some of the most important work that has ever been done has been done at HBCUs. And if you think that's hyperbole, all I have to do is say one name, just one.
Right.
George Washington Carver. Mic drop.
Yep.
Mic drop. Right there. Right there. Just an amazing scientist who did some stellar work at another HBCU.
That's right.
Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University. So I'm a big fan of HBCUs. My HBCU, my main HBCU, which is Oakwood, has produced some amazing Americans, everybody from U.S. Senate Chaplain Barry Black to the multiple Grammy-winning jazz gospel group Take Six. And, and plenty of people, in between those two. Yeah. And plenty of people whose names you won't ever know. And that's the other great thing about HBCUs. There are so many of us who graduate from there, who go on to serve this nation or to be productive members of society in ways that are important, even if our names aren't known nationally or internationally. HBCUs are an amazing resource. So anytime I can shout out an HBCU or help to shout out one, I'm glad. So I was glad you'd written that column. That was a great column.
Thank you. Matt, you're right about that, the kind of hidden history in a lot of places. And, I learned a lot about HBCUs back when we were doing the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. And, what all went on and the role so many people play, especially women, played at Alabama State. Joanne Robinson and a lot of the women that played. I mean, they would go over there in the dark of night, essentially, and type up the flyers and then run them off and print them. And it was, to listen to those folks talk about it, it was just a remarkable piece of history, that was right there in front of everybody. And, it was really, and then also the balance that went on at the university of making sure, because Levi Watkins, who's Donald Watkins' father, was at that time the president of ASU, and he had this delicate balance of trying to walk this line between making sure that the protests went off and that those folks were supported, but at the same time receiving the state funding that they required, to keep the doors open and to keep moving forward. And so, there was a lot of, there were a lot of careful maneuvering that went on there. But no, you're right. And, and it kind of brought up another thing when we were talking about this earlier. And it's something I've written about on Facebook, yes, that's how I make my money. And so, I'm completely joking about that, by the way. There's a little bit, but not much. But I saw a story about where Hugh Freeze is the coach at Auburn. Whatever you think of Hugh Freeze, he has his players, and he and his wife have donated money, and the players have donated the NIL money, the name, image, likeness money that they're now eligible to receive. They donated portions of their NIL money to help now 13 children stay out of the foster care system in Alabama.
Wow.
And
wow.
I just, man, it struck me number one, that's a great thing, and I think no matter what you think of Hugh Freeze, if you got a program where kids are doing that sort of thing, then you got a pretty good program going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever else his faults may be, that's a pretty good program.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, I mean, I just want to think about where that money would be going otherwise, and to think that instead it's now going legally to these kids to be paid up, up front for their talents and things. And most of them, this is their first real paychecks that they've received. No matter how well off or not well off they were, this is the first real checks that they've gotten for anything, because they've been involved in athletics for so long that most of them haven't really held down jobs and things like that. And if they have, it's been a little small part-time job. So this is the first real money that they've made. And they're giving it away.
Yeah. It's impressive.
I mean, it's just
very impressive.
This was supposed to ruin college athletics. Oh my God, it's going to ruin us. To pay the kids money. This is going to ruin us. But we should have been giving it to the damn kids all along.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember Nick Saban kind of lamenting the NIL thing and what it would do to college athletics, and there was some debate about that, but I think a lot of people thought, Saban has a point. This is just not going to go well. And here we have this bright side. I mean, I'm sure there are kids that are, driving around in, fancy cars and wearing fancy clothes and wasting money. But you also have this great example, as you're talking about, of just young people being generous, being caring in terms of their community, and being selfless, man. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's we've had stories now of these kids, paying off college debt for their family. Kids, essentially buying scholarships for their teammates, paying off their teammates' debt. I mean, you couldn't. I mean, they didn't need another water fountain in the training room. You know what I mean?
Right,
I mean,
right,
you know what I mean, or a waterfall or whatever in the training room, and or another TV area for them to go and watch stuff. I mean, it's just, I just think that, you're right. There are some kids out there that I'm sure are going to abuse it, and I'm sure there's some situations that coaches hate, in which players come to them for money and things like that. But you know what? I mean, that's life now. You should have been compensating these guys for decades at this point. Y'all are the ones who changed the game. You changed the game in a way to make it a business and turned it into this big business where coaches are making 11 and 12 and $13 million a year, and so. This is what they see. You have been chasing money. Coaches have been leaving left and right for better jobs all the time. And so, now you've got to deal with the consequences of that. And the consequences are the kids get the money that they deserve. And I think it's a good thing, and it's good to see some of these guys giving back, and I hope it continues. But
it kind of makes me wonder, just real quick, it kind of makes me wonder too, how dense the NCAA and these coaches and these university presidents were, that they would think that they could just continue on with this pattern indefinitely. I mean, it's such a crazy, it's the disparity between the coaches and even their own coaching staffs, let alone the students, was so crazy and insane. I mean, it's just, how, what's his name? Bill Rhoden, who used to write for, I think it was the New York Times, and I think he does a lot of work now for Anscape, the ESPN imprint. He wrote this book, basically comparing the college athletic programs to plantations, and I know that offended some people. But, the optics, from an optic standpoint, he's exactly right. He was exactly right.
Oh, yeah. Well, there, and I could talk about this all day. I used to write column after column after column about this when I was in sports. And because it has, there's no logical explanation. Everywhere you try to go with this, you get cut off by reality, all right? Because you'll have people say, well, it's college. These kids are college kids. They ought to be in class. Well, are you that worried about them being in class when you have them leave for weeks at a time during the NCAA tournament in basketball? Are you that worried about them doing that? Are you that worried about, where they're going and all that? And, oh, well, we don't listen that, this money, this is not something that they should be focusing on right now. Really, because all your boosters are paying them a lot of money right now under the table, and y'all are making sure that they're getting money left and right over things, and we're giving them gifts anyway. Because, and it's just, the reality is you set up a monopoly system with the NFL, and you set up this track to get them to the NFL, and unfairly forces them essentially to play 3 years of college football because you like the expense of like the income rolling into these colleges. That's the reason why you're doing it. And so then to sit around and pretend as though the players are now the ones being greedy is really the height of hypocrisy, And of course, leading the charge on this is Alabama senior Senator Tommy Tuberville, who's going to fix this NIL deal because, the guy who got paid $5 million when he held Auburn hostage, and that was a real hostage situation as detailed by the great Philip Marshall, when Tuberville essentially told him that his heart wasn't in it anymore to continue coaching. And so Auburn was faced with a very real scenario of Nick Saban coming in, and now you've got a guy that's going to be the greatest recruiter ever versus a guy whose heart isn't in it anymore, but who says he won't quit unless you buy him out. So you're going to have to buy him out and fire him. And so, he forced $5 million out of Auburn over that. And so now he's going to come in and be the moral compass on who's too greedy for things.
He's the poster boy for greed instead of the moral compass.
Yeah,
I used to work with Philip Marshall.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the sports section, but
right.
see him in the newsroom periodically.
Yeah, I liked Philip, man. He's, as far as I know, still around, still doing some stuff over there on P. Marshall. So he's a good people. But hey, all right, let's slide out. We're going to come back. We got the SPLC's Brandon Jones going to join us, and we're going to talk about the polling that they've done. Kind of break that down in the congressional district down in the second between Shamari Figures and Caroline Dobson, and see where things stand and what the Kamala Harris bump has meant for Shamari. So we're going to come back. We'll be back in a minute. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we're happy now to be joined by the SPLC's Brandon Jones. And Brandon, and I do this all the time, especially with the folks from SPLC. Let me get your exact title in here because I know it's something long and complicated. But yeah, you're the elections polling guy. Right.
Look, thanks for asking, Josh, because a lot of folks just full steam ahead and give us all kinds of titles and get the organization wrong and everything else. So I am the Director of Political Campaigns. Of course, we'll be talking about polling today and campaigns. And when we do that kind of stuff, we typically act under our C4. There's important distinctions from the FEC and IRS. So the SPLC Action Fund is our 501c4. And that engages in some nonpartisan political activity. And then another co-sponsor of this poll was something called New Southern Majority, which is an independent expenditure PAC. Both of those entities do not work directly with candidates or with parties. They just, but they can do some political activity independently. So thanks for asking, Director of Political Campaigns. I'll answer to most anything, though.
Director of Political Campaigns and basketball historian who came on and agreed with me completely that LeBron is the best player to ever lace him up. I believe that's what I heard. I don't know. We can do a poll later, I guess, and see what we come out at. And he agreed that David was completely wrong about his opinion about things.
Hey. Do not denigrate Magic Johnson. Thank you.
Never.
That's right.
Never. Love Magic. All right. So let's go. Let's jump right into this here. CD2 race, I wrote about it for Alabama Political Reporter and the polling that was done there, the more recent polling. And I think there were a few, I don't want to say surprising things, but I think there were some things there where we suspected there's a national trend after Kamala Harris got into the race over Joe Biden. And that seems to be playing out in this district as well, where there's a lot more enthusiasm, right?
Yeah, that's right. We polled this district towards the end of last year. And what we saw were some concerning signs of lack of enthusiasm, little lack of awareness. You know, any time that you change an entire district and district lines, that means people are voting in new elections. And there are a lot of folks, as you know, who live in these parts that are not accustomed to participating in competitive elections. In fact, just 2 years ago, in those congressional races, turnout for the Democratic primary was 57,000 in Alabama, and that was the lowest it had been in 40 years. And so, and then it also similar low performance in the general. And so, anytime that you have some people, voters who are not accustomed to participating in something where they think their vote might help with the outcome, it can be a real challenge. And so, we saw some of that in the early polling. And when we came back and polled last month, what we saw was a different picture. Enthusiasm is clearly up. It's clear that the top of the ticket has made a difference. It's clear that folks are more dialed in. And, as we'll talk about more, I'm sure, nothing over here. I mean, there's still plenty of things that could move between now and Election Day, but a much rosier picture for Democrats than what you saw heading into the year.
Yeah. To me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you think I'm wrong, but it also, I think you got a pretty clear picture in this of the change that was brought about in enthusiasm from Kamala Harris taking over for Joe Biden, because neither of these candidates has really put a lot into the ads. They've not really jumped out on TV like we know they're going to over the final few weeks of this thing. And so to me, it was all kind of just really a test of how that has changed versus the top of the ticket, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the congressional candidates are not really communicating with general election voters too much. Certainly not at the time we were in the field. And so there's a lot of room for movement as folks communicate. But what this gives you is a snapshot in time of kind of where things stand at a couple weeks after the change at the top of the ticket. So your point is exactly right. This is really a reflection on where people were with respect to the top of the ticket, I think, primarily. As we saw, as you looked into the crosstabs, while people who know Shamari figures, like Shamari figures, about 40% of the electorate doesn't know and couldn't rate it. And so, I think to your point, you have almost 100% name ID for Donald Trump in the United States. You have pretty close to that for Kamala Harris by virtue of her being the vice president for the last 4 years. And so that's kind of what you see in these numbers.
So, Brandon, let me ask you about the potential impact on voter turnout. Do we think that this statistical change is going to get us to a certain level in terms of the percentage of people who will show up for that congressional District 2 general election?
That's one of the primary concerns we have. I mean, if you were to ask us what is one of the things that we value most of all and that we care about promoting most of all, it's voter participation in the South. And we know that we lag behind other regions of the country, and this part of Alabama is an indication of that historically. So I think there's enough here to indicate that, David, we could be trending in a good direction. But I'm a big believer that polls are simply tools. And a short time after you take a poll, that information has probably changed. And so it's simply a snapshot in time, and you sort of use that to build on. And as somebody who has worked on campaigns across the South for a while now, I never get comfortable until the votes have been tabulated. So I think as I look at this particular region of Alabama, I'm thinking in terms of historical participation and thinking there's a lot of work to do over the next 60 days to make sure people know they live in a new congressional district, that they now live in a competitive district. And so, whereas before they thought it didn't matter who they voted for or the vote wasn't even contested, now it matters. So I think yes, but I think you don't want to take any of that for granted based on a single poll.
The other thing that comes to mind, for me at least, is the historical challenges in this part of Alabama to get people to vote. Is there one main factor, or are there a handful of well-defined, well-understood factors that explain perhaps why turnout has been a significant challenge in this region?
Well, we've mentioned one a moment ago, and I think people across the country have seized on this. The further polarized that we've become in gerrymandered districts and the less competitive races are, that suppresses vote. I mean, people just are not inclined to turn out if they think their vote doesn't matter. But you also have economic realities which inform vote. As you all know, in many of the states in our region, the folks who decide how voting occurs have made it really hard to vote if you're not participating on election day. And so that's a real restriction for some people. We don't have holidays on election day. So polls being open for one 12-hour window every 4 years can be a real restriction if you don't have childcare, if you have to be at work early, if you have to stay at work late. So I would say that combination of gerrymandering and our voting laws has certainly contributed to the problem. You know, the way that our polls move around on us can be a factor in the South. I mean, every election year, we're tracking which polls have been shut down, which ones have been moved. The difficulties that people face when their cities and counties don't tell them about those changes on election day. So, you know, for us, we see it through a thicket of different things, primarily man-made, that have been intentional in creating impediments to voting. And so we try to combat that with information. And that's part of what this whole poll was about. I mean, as you all know, there's not a lot of polling in non-purple states. There's just, if you live in a non-battleground state, you are typically sitting out there relying on editorial columns and your buddy at McDonald's to tell you what's going to happen. And so what we try to do by polling in some places that aren't getting that kind of treatment is to give people a little information, because we live in polling deserts, just to say, here's a little bit of what's happening, here's a little bit what your community members are saying, and hope that that contributes to the education of voters.
You know, another thing that I thought was pretty interesting was there was also, as part of this poll, there were 11 topics that voters were to decide which is the most important issues for them. And nationally, we've just seen, I believe I saw a poll last week that showed nationally abortion rights has now become the primary topic, the most important topic for voters. In this district, of the 11, it rated number 11. And you know, K through 12 education was at the top of the list. Do you feel, is that an anomaly, you think, or is it things that, or is it one of those things? Because I'm interested in your perspective on this all around too, because, you know, there's a lot of this polling that goes in, or a lot of flaws, they would say, in polling related to Donald Trump, because people just didn't want to admit that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. And is abortion kind of the same way in this state, you think, or do you feel like that's a true reflection of where people stand?
You know, I think it's still true that Dobbs has had an influence. And we know it has, because the congressional elections that took place after that decision was made by the Supreme Court, we saw how it played out in conservative, liberal districts across the country. So I think we can safely say it's having an influence. The extent of that influence now has been a little bit of a moving target, although, like you say, when you look at polls from other regions, you're seeing that as a continuing issue. And I heard this morning that pollsters feel pretty safe in saying it is the primary issue for women under 45. So I think we're still seeing, you know, exactly how that plays out. I think you could be right. Could voters in the South be a little tongue-tied about abortion, given how it's been used as a political battering ram ever since they've been voting? I think there's probably some of that. I think there still is a little bit of education that needs to happen around the implications of Dobbs. You know, it wasn't as simple as, well, we on the pro-life side won. It also means in many places there's no exception for rape or incest. It means that things like, basic health care are under some type of fog because women are concerned that they're being tracked or that their encounters with their doctor could have some type of state overview in a way that we haven't seen before. Folks who are seeking alternative ways of having children and creating families, that stuff has come under fire. And so it could be that people are not comfortable saying those things. And I think you certainly have to account for some of that in any type of polling or tool that you use. But I tend to also believe if you're going to spend a lot of money to do a poll, you kind of have to trust the data that it presents to you. And so I've been wrestling with these issues. And to your point, education was number one with a bullet. I mean, it was K through 12 education was far and away the most important issue for voters in this district. If I were working with any of the campaigns, I would take that very seriously. Safety was up there. Jobs was up there. That's not a big surprise because that's been big. I frankly thought Medicaid expansion would test higher. It's very popular. It's over a 60% issue, but I kind of thought it might be higher because I think we've increasingly become aware that our rural hospitals are in jeopardy and that people seeking health care outside of an emergency room is in jeopardy in places like Alabama. So I was thinking that might be a little higher. And then, you mentioned abortion. We saw in Alabama's House District 5 race, that appeared to be the predominant issue there. So I thought there was some indication, even in Alabama, that it might poll a little bit higher, particularly when you think about Montgomery and Mobile. But again, I'm a big believer. You kind of take what it says. So if I'm operating a campaign within this region, I might be communicating on those issues because they're important issues, but I would have to give serious weight to that K through 12 education piece because it's clearly very important and foremost on people's minds.
The other thing I wondered, and obviously, you trust the data of the polling and stuff, but historically, when you've looked back at polling in this state, has the straight ticket voting, when you're taking the polls versus what actually happens in the elections and comparing the two, does the straight ticket voting ever skew those numbers off?
Yeah, it does because especially when you're trying to measure down ticket races, because if you ask someone individually how they feel about two options, they might answer that in a variety of different ways. But sometimes what polls fail to capture is that this person is inclined to go in and straight ticket vote. So all of these different nuanced things taking place down the ballot really aren't that relevant. We used to say that local races were not as polarized and partisan. Straight ticket voting kind of takes that away. I mean, it kind of makes it less likely that you're going to break through, even if you're someone who has great appeal at the local level. And yeah, you see that in the polls. Someone who might poll well as a down ticket candidate can't overcome the party ID stuff.
We got to get rid of that. It's just, no matter which side of the aisle you're on with this, we got to get rid of the straight ticket voting and get.
But how? How do you do it?
Well, our legislature, they work for us, David, all the time.
But it's not in their best interest to do that, though. They're not going to do that.
What? But they are you saying that they don't do what's in our best interest? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
That's just some home truths from David right there. I think that's a tough one to push. I do think it's worth noting too, though, because I heard in your question another thing too. Y'all may remember that even in these states that we're watching like a hawk now, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, y'all may remember total polling wipeout in 2016. We learned then that the state polling in these places was not that great. It got a little better in 2020. And I'm told by folks who really know what they're talking about that it's probably as good as it's ever been now. But I think that's an important note for those of us who live in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, places down here that aren't getting this type of attention. Polling is challenging under the best of circumstances. It can really be tough in states like ours, where you don't have a lot of this stuff happening, where the voter files are not as well developed as in other places. And so I think it's smart. You always take this stuff with a grain of salt, but you certainly have to consider those things when you consider polling in places like we live, because those challenges.
Yeah. I think I asked you this for the story. This is the last thing we'll get you out of here. Was there anything that was very surprising to you out of this poll?
Well, I think the thing that stood out to me, I don't know if I would, the shift was positive for the presidential ticket and for the congressional ticket. But there were two things that stood out to me if I were kind of thinking about how to frame these races or if I were talking in campaigns. One of them is that the support, particularly for Shamari figures, is a soft support. And so what that means is if you press people to make their preference, they might say Shamari figures. But when you ask them how enthusiastic they are about participating, that number might not come in at 70% plus. So from my perspective, if you have someone who might have a preference but hasn't fully decided that they're going to turn out on election day, that means there's some work to do. You have to get these people to become people who prefer you, but who also intend to go vote and are going to make an election day plan. So I would be saying, look, just because you're winning in the poll, these folks didn't have to do anything but answer their phone to do this or to respond to a text. There's a big difference in that and showing up on some Tuesday in November. So I think that's a big one. And I think the other thing was, and we didn't mention this issue, for Black voters in this district, it was a huge motivating factor that they could send someone to Congress who could limit Donald Trump from having his way in Congress if he were elected. That was a huge motivating factor. So when you ask people, hey, we know the House of Representatives is very equally divided. You might send someone up there that would be +1 for Democrats. That could be a vote that keeps Donald Trump from getting his way with his agenda. That was very motivating. So the send a message, keep Trump under control, that was a big motivator. And so that's another thing I would be thinking about if I were, advising one of these campaigns.
I just have to say, since I am the Black representative for this show,
hey,
Black people everywhere.
Oh, I'm
sorry. There's no question in my mind that would be a motivator. I mean, the things we Black people say about Trump, man, let me tell you, we are very displeased with this guy. And the thing I like to remind people of is that it's really not even about him being a Republican or a conservative. I don't think as much as it is that he's just a jackass.
Well said.
And there it is.
No.
It's hard to argue. I mean, it's quite a state that we put ourselves in, where we're essentially voting to send babysitters up to Congress to make sure that the guy that they're going to elect to the White House doesn't do all the crazy things he wants to do.
Exactly.
Well, they've given us a playbook, Project 2025, which, by the way, most voters we talked to in the poll, they knew what that was. But if you look at that playbook, it really brings this stuff into stark relief, because it's like, man, you don't want any of that. And I think that's kind of what people were thinking is, we know what the agenda is, and so don't want any of that.
Yeah. Well, listen, Brandon, thank you, man, for coming on and spending some time, and also just for doing this, because I mean, we would have no clue if y'all weren't out there doing this polling and trying to give us a good, fair look at what's actually taking place on the ground with folks. Then we would be lost. We would be lost without it. So thank y'all, and thank you, the SPLC, and everybody involved. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, great organization doing great work.
Absolutely, it is. And all right, I think we might have lost Brandon. That's okay. He was great, and we definitely I appreciated him coming on and spending some time, and also talking to me for the story last week. So both really, really great. All right, we're going to slide out. We're going to come back. We'll wrap this baby up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a minute. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by our good friends at Wind Creek Entertainment. Really would like to thank them. I'd like to thank the SPLC. In full disclosure, the SPLC does advertise with us, although it's a different organization than what Brandon works with, and I don't really see what that bias would have gotten us in this particular case. It's not like anybody else has got a poll out there we could quote. No. Thanks for the SPLC for sponsoring. Thanks for Brandon for coming on and spending some time with us, and for all of y'all for listening, especially Don out there. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple of bills that have been proposed. The first one being an anti-vaping in public places law. I know this kind of caught your attention, David. And so are you for the anti-vaping law? Are you against the anti-vaping law?
I actually am for it. Yeah, it's I have been around people vaping, and first of all, it's been a minute since I've looked at done any serious reading on this, but my recollection is that being exposed to secondhand vaping is at least as dangerous as being exposed to secondhand cigarette smoke, if not worse. Mm-hmm. There's something about vaping that seems to be more intense, but yet people perceive in terms of its impact on us, the vapor as well as those around the vapor. But the perception is that it's somehow less harmful than cigarettes. Yeah. And I'm not sure why that is. Is it the aroma? Is it the technology? I don't know what it is that disarms us. But I absolutely believe vaping should not be allowed in public spaces any more than cigarette smoking or cigar smoking should be.
I don't know a whole lot about vaping. Vaping is a relatively new thing for me anyway. Mm-hmm. I don't do it, but it's relatively new as far as I just don't know anything. I've never cared to know anything about it. I don't nobody I know closely vapes. I think we have some friends that may on occasion or whatever. And so I'll tell you this, my perception of it has always been that it is a little safer than cigarette smoke because of, you don't get the tar stuff, the burn off from the cigarette like you would. Some of the other harmful things that take place. You get the nicotine, but you don't get some of the other things that go into it. But that's again, I'm not presenting that to anybody as factual. Okay, right. At all. And I'm fine with the no vaping in public spaces law. I think that it whenever you're doing something like that affects a group of people around you. I don't think you don't have any right to do that. I don't have any right to spit on people. You know what I mean? Right. It's and it's essentially not really exactly the same, but it's along the same lines there. Well, you're spreading something into the air that's going to touch me, and I can ingest, and I may be allergic. You don't know. You have no idea.
Mm-hmm. I had there was a woman I used to date a few years back who was a vapor. Mm-hmm. And I initially, if she was in my house, I would let her vape in the house. But after a while, man, I had to stop that because it would just permeate the house, and that's, I think, when I started. That was the point where I think I started reading up more on, but just what is this? Because it was still relatively new then, right?
Right.
And so, I had to start reading up on that. And once I read up on it, I was like, "Nah, you can't do this." And if you're in,
did you break up with this woman over the vaping?
No.
You did make up this one.
No.
Okay.
No, the vaping was not the reason. The
Okay.
vaping was, but the vaping didn't help.
There was a contributing factor.
I would say there were several factors, but the vaping didn't help. But I will say this: I didn't grow up, smoking. I've never smoked anything a day in my life. I didn't grow up around cigarette smoke or cigar smoke. So I have probably a higher level of sensitivity to that whole activity,
Sure. Listen, hey, it's your house. I mean, although I will say this kind of sounds like a Seinfeld episode. And she does kind of sound like a Seinfeld character, the vapor. She's a vapor. She's a vapor. Yeah. Listen, it's a bill sponsored by Gerald Allen, and I got to say that I don't think either one of us felt like we would be here today talking about the good bill sponsored by Gerald Allen. So miracles happen every day. Kids, they happen every day. There is also a bill proposed by Chris England that would raise the online sales tax in the state. Impose more sales tax that would go towards education. And it's proposed by Chris England. And I understand what Chris is trying to do with this. And, that doesn't mean that I'm for it. I feel like we pay too much in sales tax already. Okay. I understand. I know also the benefits of saying a more online sales tax means that you then kind of force people into the local places around the brick and mortar shops and that kind of thing. You give them more incentive to go and do that. I get that. I think, although I do think those days have gone to the wayside. Okay. I mean, I don't, it's so common now. It's so easy. It's everybody, all the local places are mostly online now anyways, as well as the big box places. I just don't think that you're getting the same benefits. I don't like sales tax. If you want to come to me and talk about raising property taxes, okay, let's talk about raising property taxes to pay for education. Let's talk about raising taxes on incomes above a certain level. Let's do that. But this to me is another way of extracting money from a regressive tax that is more unfairly imposed on the poor people. And listen, I know when you say that, people say, well, it's a percentage. How can it be? Well, because when a poor person pays that same percentage as a rich person, it affects the poor person more. Okay.
That's right.
It's just
exactly
basic sense,
Yeah.
And so to me, I think we have set up our government funding in that sort of way with this sort of regressive tax and with the fines and fees situation that takes place. I don't want another one. I don't want another one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you make a good argument. I don't have any real opposition to your argument, especially when you factor in the fact that what we really ought to be doing is targeting areas for taxation where people with means can absorb more of it, like property, and like income. So I mean, from that standpoint, I agree with you. The argument about, the psychology, and I'm thinking now just about this past weekend being in Destin, the psychology of shopping and spending is fascinating. So, people are not spending as much in brick and mortars in their hometowns, it appears. But man, you go to Destin on a holiday weekend, there are gobs of us out there spending money. I mean, I spent money I didn't plan to spend. Because they got
an airbrush T-shirt. Is that what you did? You were going around getting an airbrush T-shirt?
No, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. But I mean, you're in a place with outlets, and my lady, she likes to hit the outlets, so we go to the outlets, and lo and behold, before I know it, I'm spending money I didn't plan to spend.
That's right.
And I was talking to one of the clerks there, and he was just like, "Bro, it is like." He said Thanksgiving, Black Friday is even worse.
Oh.
I was like, really? He said, oh, yeah, man. He said, they rack up. And I was like, okay, well, there's just something about being in these little, and I don't know what's comparable in Alabama to that.
Well, they have them. They have them down around the Gulf Shores, Orange Beach area. Those Tanger outlets.
And I have not. It's been so long since I've been to Gulf Shores. I don't know if they're attracting that. Do you think they're attracting that same volume of sales that
I would guess. I'm not a big outlet person. I'm more of the if I'm going, it's we wander around and follow, take the bags to the truck and wait in the truck for a while, and then go back and get the bags and take them back to the truck and wait for a while. It's, especially if it's a fall situation, I can watch a football game while I'm sitting in the truck, and it's my wife and now my little one, they do love the outlets. My little girl, she's right in there with mom now, and they love to go and shop and do their thing and find clothes and find good deals and all kind of stuff. She's a deal person. Like, look at this. I got this for next to nothing. You're not going to believe what we saved.
Yeah, I think that's the whole attraction. But anyway, I guess I'm saying all that to say that I can understand that there would be some desire to try to encourage people to do more local shopping and less online shopping. And I try. Sure. I do try to do that, but you're right. There are some times when it's just hard to escape the appeal of being able to shop anytime you want, day or night, without leaving your home. It's kind of hard to beat.
I mean, it's really hard to beat going online and saying, hey, oh man, I need dog food, and having a person bring you dog food to your house. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just, it's difficult. And listen, I've lived in both. I was around before the internet. And so I understand that, and I think that there was a time when we should have done more to encourage people to get into those brick and mortar stores. But I just feel like that time has sailed at this point, because a lot of those people who are running those brick and mortar stores locally are now online as well, and they're selling things, whether it's their own website or on Etsy or some of these other places. It's they're doing that business. Which, you know what? Speaking of which, were you aware that Radio Shack is making a comeback?
No.
Yes.
Wasn't. Really?
Radio Shack is apparently. First of all, Radio Shack never went away. In some places, I had no idea that there are Radio Shack stores in America that are open, and now they're under new ownership, and they're coming back. Now, I mean, I'll send you a video, a commercial that they've cut, and it's. I had no clue, no idea, and so when I saw the commercial, I thought, well, this has got to be an old commercial. This looks old. And then, but towards the end of the commercial, I was like, "Well, that looks new. That looks like a new store." Because I mean, it was earbuds and an upgraded electronics type store. Kind of looked like a version of Best Buy these days, And so I went online, I Googled it up, and according to the Googles, they were purchased not too long ago by some folks that have kind of revamped the store and have turning them around and bringing them back.
Wow. Okay.
I know, man. I know.
I used to like to go to Radio Shack and just look around.
Too. Yeah. Loved it. Loved going in. There was always something you needed in Radio Shack. There was always something that you needed in there.
Yeah.
Just a gadget here, a gadget there, something for the video game, a connector to the TV. I mean, there's so many things that today's kids just will never understand. I mean, blowing in that Nintendo game to make it work. I mean, it's just, there's so many things that they just will never get. It's a shame. Yeah. But maybe they can get the experience of Radio Shack.
Maybe so.
All right. Our right wing nut. Let's get to that. Our right wing nut this week is one Donald John Trump. And Don.
Oh, the J stands for John, not jackass.
Well, depends on who you are. Jackass works as well. So Don, I wrote a column, and this column talked about the unending amount of shit that Joe Biden took over the course of the last several months for his mental decline. you know, in which, you know, he forgot a word here or there. You know, he got stuck on Medicare during the debate. Everybody freaked out. You know, he sometimes would switch up the names of world leaders when he was talking. He would misspeak and say their names wrong. He would sometimes pause during speeches and for a little too long, people thought. And, you know, this is a mental decline. He's not all there. You know, oh, what are we doing?
Right.
Allow me, if you will, to read some quotes from the last few weeks.
Okay.
From the person who is the Republican nominee for president. Verbatim. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your kid goes to school and he comes home a few days later with an operation. The school decides what's going to happen with your child. And many of these childs, 15 years later, say, what the hell happened? Who did this to me? They say, who did this to me? It's incredible. This is your president talking about transgender children.
What?
And apparently, he believes that schools are performing surgeries on children. Your kid goes to school and he comes home a few days later with an operation. He also seems to believe that the plural of child is childs.
Wait, did I miss that? Did he say child?
Oh, yeah. And many of these childs, 15 years later, say, what the hell happened? Yeah.
Wow.
Wait a minute. Here's one in which he was going to talk about the economy.
Before you go on, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on something. This is from audio or video, not printed transcripts, right? You heard?
Oh, it's audio. Yes, it's audio, video, and then I took the transcripts. I took them myself. This is verbatim. This is not what I'm going to read to you. This one right here comes in about a 10-second span. Okay, That's how long it takes him to say this.
Okay.
You take a look at bacon and some of these products. Some people don't eat bacon anymore. And we're going to get the energy prices down. You know, this was caused by their horrible energy. Wind. They want wind all over the place. When it doesn't blow, we have a problem.
So that is what we would call a non sequitur, meaning the first part of what he said had no logical connection to the second part of what he said.
Sure. This is from another event in Michigan this last week. Talking about Kamala Harris is where we start. She destroyed the city of San Francisco. And I own a big building there. I shouldn't talk about this, but that's okay. I don't give a damn because this is what I'm doing. I should say it's the finest city in the world. Sell and get the hell out of there, right? But I can't do that. I don't care. You know, I lost billions of dollars. You know, somebody said, what do you think you lost? I said, probably 2-3 billion. That's okay. I don't care. They say, you think you'd do it again? And that's the least of it. Nobody. They always say, I don't know if you know, Lincoln was horribly treated. Jefferson was pretty horribly. Andrew Jackson, they say, was the worst of all, that he was treated worse than any other president. I said, do that study again because I think there's nobody close to Trump. I even got shot, and who the hell knows where that came from, right?
Yeah, that was such a mishmash of language and logic and content. I think I actually heard that one myself, and I remember thinking even if you want to give him, if you're enormously sympathetic to him and you just want to give him all the benefits of the doubt that you cannot convince me that there's a billionaire, so-called billionaire, anywhere who would say, oh, I lost $2 or $3 billion and I don't care.
Yeah, right. That's the other point that I was making in this column, which is, even if you forgive the crazy speech, the non sequiturs, the where he just rambles and he goes off on tangents and you have no idea what the hell he's talking about, and now you see people at his rallies actually leaving because they just have no idea what the hell he's just babbling and they have no idea what he's talking about anymore. Yeah. Even if you forgive all of that babbling and you just boil it down to what he's saying, it's insanity. It is insane nonsense. Like, for example, the other day when he claimed that if Jesus had came to earth and counted the votes in California, he would have won California, where he lost by 8 million votes. Or when he claimed that you can't walk across the street to get a loaf of bread, you'll get mugged, you'll get raped. Or when he claimed that his January 6th insurrection crowd at the rally on the lawn out there was bigger than Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream rally. Yeah. Or when he claimed that in 4 years you won't have to vote again.
Yeah.
Or there is this, Jewel, that I'll leave you with. Possibly the most insane thing that a president has ever said in the history of insane things presidents say. So I said, let me ask you a question. And he said, nobody ever asked this question, and it must be because of MIT, my relationship to MIT. Very smart. I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery, and the battery's underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there? By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. I watched some guys justifying it today. Well, they weren't really that angry. They bit off the young lady's leg because of the fact that they were not hungry, but they misunderstood who she was. These people are crazy. He said there's no problem with sharks. They just didn't really understand a young woman swimming now who really got decimated, and other people too. A lot of shark attacks. So I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards or here. Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking and water goes over the battery and the boat is sinking? Do I stay up on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question. I said, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of electric current coming through the water. But you know what? What I'd do? If there was a shark or you get electrocuted, I'll take the electrocution every single time. I'm not getting near the shark.
It's incredible to me that there are people who think he's a credible presidential candidate when he expends so much time and energy talking about foolish nonsense.
Joe Biden left the race because he couldn't say the word Medicare.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? No matter what you think of Joe Biden and his mental decline. And I think we all, when we watched that debate, we all came to the same conclusion that it was probably best for the country, the party, everybody involved, that Biden drop out.
Yeah.
Nobody ever could say that Joe Biden said this crazy shit.
No.
Nowhere.
No. And I'm glad you said that, because I think many of us have also felt that Donald Trump should drop out of the race, but he has also so desensitized us. We're just kind of accustomed to him saying things that make no sense, to the non sequiturs, to the flat out foolishness. And so we don't say it because it's almost like, oh, well, that's a foregone conclusion. We know he should drop out. We know he's not going to drop out. So we just don't say it enough, when we really should be underscoring this every time with the kinds of statements that you shared in your column. That guy is not, his mental acuity is just not there.
No.
For whatever reason.
And that is on top of the racist statements, the insane things that he believes, the religious tests that he wants to impose on people,
the misogyny,
the misogyny, the way he treats or would like to treat immigrants in this country. That's on top of all that. I mean, we know that people don't like it because the one time that Republicans dared to put their policies on paper, Project 2025, everybody went, holy shit, don't show that to anybody, and everybody run away from it. I mean, that's just literally what happened. They put it on paper and everybody was like, whoa, my God, no, don't show that to anybody.
Right.
I mean,
it's too late, though. It's too late.
Yeah. And so that's on top of all of that, with this crazy stuff right here. And what drives me insane is this, as though we have two tracks in this presidential race, okay? And we have this track over here that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been on, in which we treat these people the same as Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in 20 and all the other Democratic nominees and people that have run for president. This track over here, we still treat them and vet them the same way we do all the other normal candidates that have come along, all right? And we talk about, people are investigating whether or not Kamala Harris worked at McDonald's 35 years ago, and we're did she really work at McDonald's? I don't know.
And trying to suggest that because she no longer has that on her resume, that she must be lying or hiding something. There is plenty of stuff. I don't know about you, but there's plenty of stuff that's no longer on my resume because it's not relevant.
No.
I used to work at a kidney dialysis center, after college. I don't put that on my resume anymore. It's not relevant. It hasn't been on my resume for probably 20 plus years.
She's the vice president of the country.
Exactly.
She was the attorney general from California. She was a U.S. senator from California.
Why would she put
the
McDonald's
DA
on
in
there?
San Francisco? I mean,
why would she have still have McDonald's on her resume? That's not relevant.
But here's the thing though. Now we're talking about that. We're talking about that. And in the meantime, when she was working, maybe or maybe not working at McDonald's, the other dude was denying black people housing. Okay.
Thank you.
You know what? This is the insanity of this. It's the shit on the wall approach. Okay, that Trump has taken, in which if you just keep throwing it up there, there's so much of it that it's like it overwhelms the media. And now all of a sudden you just kind of get a pass because they can't spend all of their time talking about your craziness and the stupid things that you say and the awful shit that you say. And so somehow or another, you just kind of get a pass for all of it, and it just becomes, that's just Trump talking, man.
Well, it's Trump fatigue. If there is a real Trump syndrome out there, it's Trump fatigue. That's what it is. We're all sick and tired of him. We're sick and tired of his mess, his stupidity, his narcissism. I mean, even the people that support him, I think, are tired of it. And his campaign seems to be tired of it, but nobody knows what to do because the guy is just so contrarian and so weird and probably the most hardcore narcissist that we've ever seen in public life. That nobody knows what to do.
It's just it's a farce. It's and to watch these people try to defend him and try to stand up for him. I was happy to see that John McCain's son this week came out and said, the Arlington thing was just, he just couldn't do it. Went so far as to change his voter registration to Democrat. And, and we need some more people to take a stand against this. And it would be nice if he would just get completely and utterly obliterated. In the upcoming election, and this be the absolute end of this complete shit show of the era of the United States, and we can put this shameful thing behind us. And 10 years from now, everybody will be denying that they ever supported him. And I wasn't supporting that guy.
I think that's the track we're on. At least it appears as though we are. But I will say this: I don't understand how any person with the last name of McCain could have waited this long to disavow this guy.
I don't think that they were voting for him. I think that he switched his voter registration to Democrat. And so I think that was the big move on the thing.
Well, I mean, to me, the moment that he said, well, you know what, I'm not going to judge them. They do what they do. But the moment that he said that McCain, when he denigrated McCain for being a POW, I was offended. And I haven't served in the military. Now, my father did, but I haven't served in the military. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a conservative. And I was outraged that he said that.
Yeah. That's well, my stance. I am a I'm a tremendously pro-military guy. My dad served. I did not either. My dad served. I have a lot of friends who have. I have done a lot of work with military folks around, and I have a lot of respect for what they do, and I have a lot of disrespect for the way they are often treated. And yeah, to watch this dude who took all the deferments, throw shots at a guy like McCain was reprehensible. And listen, I didn't agree with John McCain on most things policy wise, but I certainly appreciated the way he conducted himself and the way that he handled business and the way that he treated people. And I don't understand it either. I will never be able to wrap my head around Ted Cruz. The dude literally talked about his wife being ugly and said that his dad was in on the assassination of JFK. So, I mean, I just, what are y'all doing? How little of a spine do you have to then turn around and vote for this guy, or support him? It's just remarkable. But anyways, that he is our right-wing nut, and he will be our right-wing nut forever. And so, that's our guy, DJT. Hopefully this is the end of the line for him.
I hope and pray so.
Absolutely. Hey, all right, that's going to do it for us. Until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.